Hey everybody, it's the Week in the Tackle podcast, the podcast where we look back at the previous week in soccer and or football, delete as appropriate, I don't want to get into an argument here, and decide the things we want to tackle. I'm Tom Runny, Brian Dunsethery is with me. How are you, mate? You all right?
I'm good, Rennie. I'm good. I had a fantastic game out at LAFC. Incredible atmosphere. You're talking goals, you're talking assists, you're talking red cards, you're talking probably a little bit of the dark arts that come into play. And most importantly, you got a game winner in the 90th +2. So fantastic weekend alongside Max Bretos and Marcelo Balboa, JP Navarro out with the Apple crew. But I just couldn't stop, man. I couldn't stop consuming. As much as I've tried to adhere to my New Year's resolution of not watching Manchester United because they just pissed me off. On the flight down, I did. This time, I was fortunate enough to turn the phone upside down, leave it alone, close it, walk away, go have breakfast with my friends. But then I did thoroughly enjoy waking up and watching the North London Derby as I sat on my plane and jiggled myself all the way back home because that was one hell of a game, Tom Rennie. One hell of a game. You thought the door was completely slammed shut. And then the Kangaroo Jack, Big Ange Postecoglou, figured out a way to make it a little bit nerve-wracking for Mikel Arteta.
I mean, it was so good. I went to the game on Sunday and, I've been to so many stadiums, as I know you have as well. And it is such an incredible stadium, the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. The sound that is generated in there. And currently it's still got that kind of new stadium smell. Yeah. So, like, the singing sections aren't quite worked out yet. And it's not like... everyone knows what they're doing, sort of, that takes 10, 15, 20 years to get to a point where, that's where the hardcore sit or whatever. But before the game, it had such an amazing big game atmosphere. And in a way, it was a bit pathetic. Like the Arsenal fans were singing, "You're only here for the Arsenal." And it kind of felt like they were, which I think will probably get under the skin of Tottenham fans a little bit. Our good friend, the brilliant Paul Coyte, who joined us on Sirius XM FC last week, he's the pitch announcer there. It's fantastic, by the way. He is so good at that job. And I've seen people be bad at it, so you know when someone's really good at it. And he does a bit of VT before the game to the crowd, and they play a bunch of songs, and it's Seven Nation Army and all that. And he's like, "The great Bill Nicholson said, you've only got to win 2 games as Tottenham Hotspur manager. Arsenal away and Arsenal at home." And he does a great bit of up the Spurs and gets everyone pumped. And it's a brilliant stage show. They work. I mean, it's such a modern, amazing venue. Before the game, they had 3 blokes standing up on the edge of the kind of cockerel bit above the cop stand, playing the bugle bit he does before the game. But it was just sort of like, I went to West Ham Bayer Leverkusen last week, and that was the quarterfinal of the Europa League. That deserved the big kind of oomph. Yeah. And though this is a big game, it was still a kind of standard league derby. So, the anticlimactic nature of that first half, when Spurs were the better team, I thought, but found themselves 3-0 down to a couple of corners and a breakaway that maybe shouldn't have been allowed because there was a thing at the other end. Danny, a quick note on that, because do you think Spurs were a bit too up for that game to actually manage it professionally? Because that's something they talk about with Postecoglou, and he's wrapped Spurs up in his barbecue, if you will. They're his shrimp at this point. Does that work? I don't know. It just felt like, maybe if Spurs were a little bit more even keel, they wouldn't have got so into it, and maybe it wouldn't have been such a crushing blow at halftime. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say there's probably 4 factors for me. Number 1, it's the North London Derby. Number 2, it's an opportunity to take Arsenal out and take them out of the Premier League title race. And number 3, it's an opportunity with kind of the slip up with Villa that maybe there's a chance that they can lock down the 4th and final position for Champions League before the coefficient potentially comes into play. So those are all those 3 factors I think are intriguing. But I think most importantly, we have to acknowledge that there's 2 different, we call them projects, but I'll say phases. I think projects is probably overused. I would say phases. What we're recognizing is that similar to Jurgen Klopp when he took over Liverpool, there's a change in the mentality of what we're seeing at Tottenham. There's an idea in terms of style of play with player personnel, and obviously the departure, which we talked about, which was inevitable of Harry Kane at some point, that there would be a cultural shift inside that locker room. There would be a power vacuum of leadership, of playing potential, and most importantly, goal scoring. So I think there's an undeniable I think, ascent of what we've seen in the first year of Ange Postecoglou. Now, the question is in the summer transfer window and what this looks like. Should they qualify for Champions League? Should they not qualify? And it should be a Europa League instead. Whatever this looks like. This is, I would say, first phase of these are our non-negotiables of how we're going to play. And I think he's done a good job of making that very evident. There's a non-negotiable style of how we're going to play. Now, I think the evolution over time, and he gets more players and he starts adding pieces, and I'll use this reference to Mikel Arteta in a second, that he'll get to where he wants. And ultimately, they will settle in kind of a new dynamic of how they're playing, their overall football, offensive and defensive. The flip side is Mikel Arteta's been in the job, what, 5 seasons, 6 seasons now? I mean, he was able to spend the 100 million on Declan Rice. He was able to spend whatever, the 50, 60, 70 million on Kai Havertz. So he's able to pluck and pick and bring in David Raya, the players that he wanted. Those 3 additions alone were significant in the offseason. So we're talking about 2 phases, right? Arsenal in the phase of what they could build on last year of potentially winning the Champions League and falling short, or winning the Premier League, falling short, and now this year. So in your initial question, I think those 4 factors have a huge influence in how the game was played, how the game was approached. And I don't know, I rub my fingers together, kind of the gray area of what kind of comes into that game, the dark arts, the Ben White trying to undo the gloves of Vicario, and, the issues and giggles that comes into play over the course of the match. It was a fun match to watch as a neutral, but I thought the game was buried after the 38th minute from Kai Havertz.
Well, yeah, I mean, on that, this is another element of the Postecoglou thing that I'll follow up on, because the way they play, absolutely, it's so evident and clear and fun. And when you speak to Spurs fans who'd suffered through Antonio Conte and that weird janitor bloke that was in charge for a few weeks last season, Jose Mourinho in the not too distant past, Spurs fans often say, we ain't going to win the league. So at the very least, can we enjoy our Saturday or whatever at the stadium? You're certainly enjoying watching Tottenham. I love going to Tottenham. I'm going again to the Man City game next week, which is going to be fantastic. But I am going to watch Tottenham as much as Man City, which is a great compliment to what Postecoglou has done. You couldn't have paid me. Well, you did pay me, but you know what I mean, to go and watch Tottenham under Antonio Conte at times. But at 2-0 down, Danny, you're an analyst of games. There are other managers, and maybe Antonio Conte is a good reference point here. At 2-0 down, when you've been the better team, the first goal is they try and play up in the back. They give away a corner and an own goal is scored from it. That's shooting yourself in both feet.
Yeah.
Then there's a breakaway goal and there's a controversy. Is there a penalty at the other end? I think they got it right, but they're feeling a bit miffed, and Saka scores on the break. At that point, I'll tell you what Antonio Conte does. That was about 30 minutes in, 32 minutes in. He says, right, we're on the roller coaster here, and we don't want to get knocked out of sight by the league leaders. So we sit back, we absorb, we get to 2-0 at half time. And as we saw in the second half, they were more than capable of scoring 2 goals in this match against Arsenal. But he didn't do that. And then that led to another goal. That led to further chances. And that game was so far away from Tottenham by the second half beginning, even with a big performance, a more measured performance in the second half, they couldn't get something from the game. I would say that was naivety, if not for the fact that Postecoglou's been a manager for 20 years. And if you say that to him, he'll say about some Japanese league he won 20 years ago or something about Celtic. What do you make to that accusation? And they can't defend corners as well. I mean, in the end, these are the elements that the coach is meant to improve. And they were kind of doing that against Chelsea 7 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, corners have really been unkind to them defensively. And I saw the post-game presser where he said, mate, if I think corners are the issue, that'll be the difference between us qualifying for Champions League and winning games, then we'd be focusing on it every single moment of every single training session. Which he's right. And contextually, I understand where he's coming from. I also recognize what he said about Cristian Romero, basically, that if you can take the spirit that is embodied by the Argentine and kind of pass it around, that makes them much more difficult to play against. So I get all those things. Listen, I think to your point with how open the game was, and even when they were playing well, and the Kulusevski, I think if he goes to ground immediately, it's a pen because he tried to kind of fight through it. So is there an advantage? Could he have gotten a shot off? Was it enough to take him down in real time? All those were differentiating factors. And the VAR thing I know we'll get into, and the referees that we'll get into, because we get into it every week, because what looks very similar in one case is not called for another case. And it's just mind-boggling where we're at, continuously at where we're at in these conversations 38 games in. If they score 2-1, game's different, right? They always say it's the worst lead in football, 2-0, because all of a sudden you feel comfortable, you take your foot off the gas pedal, you start to manage the game a little bit more, you become a less proactive, more reactive, and then all of a sudden the other team gets in it. And then there's a swing of momentum. You talk about the atmosphere and the energy and the sound and the wave that comes along with that. So yeah, I get all that. It's moments, Tom. You know, I try every week to kind of think about from a player's perspective what it would feel like. And I guess I've kind of always settled on now, similar to what we'll be talking about with Champions League next week and how this all kind of plays itself out, the first leg versus second leg. It's the first half versus second half. Very rarely can you win the game in the first half. You can certainly lose the game in the first half. And I think that's maybe it was naive in the manner in which they were defending. Maybe that's just reality with who they are. Maybe there is that big of a gap between these two teams, and showing that defensively, the midfield setup, the whatever the game module is, how they defend in their own half. It just seems like this year at times, while I really can enjoy from a neutral's perspective the way that Ange wants his team to play, they seem to be more vulnerable with the ball defensively, meaning that the numbers that they're committing forward, the kind of the idea of how they're trying to attack and slow the game down and then be methodical in their buildup, that if you can nip a ball off them and all of a sudden play the ball in the channel, that's where they're in some big trouble, because they play a high line, both outside backs like to get forward, and then all of a sudden they're in a really uncomfortable situation. So it's moments. I would say this game was decided by moments, and those moments were decided in that first 38 minutes by Arsenal.
One of the great things about getting to go to the game, and when you're not doing the commentary of it, so you're not so involved in your notes and your delivery and, your own work, is that you get to watch individual players. And I actually got to tell you, that second half, I didn't take my eyes off Cristian Romero. I couldn't stop watching him. The goal he scores, if you watch this back, he plays a forward pass that's not very good. It hits an Arsenal defender, and he just keeps charging forward aimlessly, directionlessly, inexplicably. And then David Raya has his Aaron Ramsdale moment, passes straight to him, and Romero scores. And you're just a little bit like, how did that happen? Well, it happened because Cristian Romero just wasn't having that anymore. Sorry, Tim. He was just like 3-0 down. This. Sorry, Tim. And I wonder if other managers might have been a bit like, where's your discipline? Stay in shape.
Yeah.
And this particular manager, I don't know, obviously must encourage this and allow this to happen, because for other teams, that's a big no. For this guy, I feel like, I don't know, he was almost like, be more him. And he could have scored as well in another attack when he just heads over the bar.
Yeah, listen, I bring it to a Manchester United perspective only because his international partner, Lisandro Martinez, is, when available, the best defender that Manchester United has. And he's got a little bit of, he's got a little, like, you hate these guys if they're not your team, but you love these guys if they're your player, right? I mean, I think we can say that for every single team and every single player, right? You look at him, you're like, I hate that guy. And then all of a sudden you get him, you're like, oh, he's brilliant. I love that guy.
Yeah.
I just go back to the thrashing and the red cards against Chelsea earlier in the season. 5-0 down, 6-0 down. What do you say? We'll still have a pop, like, when talking about the high line and how naive they were to play and being exposed and blah, blah, blah. I think that in a way you got to kind of like take the moment out of the equation and look at the bigger picture sometimes. And I think the bigger picture that I've seen from day one with Ange Postecoglou is that there's a culture setting that's happening, and it's more about the mentality. It's less about the play, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you got to have a leader that's inspirational. And Ange is certainly has that connectivity with the media where he's going to get more of a break, right? Because all of a sudden there's a respect, and I wouldn't say an admiration, but there's an enjoyment of listening to his perspective when being asked about whether it's outside of football, it's the authority of football, it's the VAR element, or it's just the tactics and the shape and the identity. He does a good job of conveying publicly what he's looking for. And I think when there's moments like that, and I think you do a good job explaining it and giving us kind of the insight of what it looks like inside the stadium, that right there, it's less about the structure. It's more about the mentality. It's about the spirit. It's about the desire. And I think all of those things are really, really important in kind of this early phase of what Tottenham's going to continue to look like under Ange Postecoglou.
My final thought on this before we go to some other stories is that I really hate what Man City have done to football. I really hate it because this Arsenal team, and you've spoken about the development of Tottenham on the show already. Their development is so clear. It's happened over a period of time. It has happened with massive investment. This is not some fairy story here. It is a modern Premier League, wise transfers, on-field development story. And that deserves a title. They deserve to be champions. They are the best team in the country. And if they can't win it, I actually don't know what we do here as kind of Premier League English football consumers. And we'll maybe have some time for the salary cap conversation later because, you know, this is what used to happen. Dan, you'll recall this from the glory Man United days. They did have a wobble. There was games where they went into it and they lost. There was the game at Upton Park for Man United where they lost the title and Blackburn won it. There was, you know, Newcastle and Man United's 96-97 title charge. They've still got to go to Middlesbrough and get a result. I would love it if they beat them. Love it. Kevin Keegan, all that. We used to get that because the title winners didn't used to be dominant, imperious, such a wage bill compared to the rest. There was almost no chance of beating them. Not many of us have any hope of City dropping a single point in the final 6 or 7. They always used to. There was a risk element in it. And what Arsenal did this weekend was not play particularly well, I think, across the piece. Get an important victory, win those moments, defend like Trojans at the end, ride their luck, make mistakes. Even Declan Rice, who rarely makes errors, tried to kick a player's balls off for no reason in the penalty area at 3-1 up. And they still had to get that reviewed on a penalty VAR call, right? So much to love about this game. And that narrative of having to work to be champions, I don't know. I then watched the Man City game on the train home afterwards, having had to do a 40-minute walk to Tottenham Hale because for some reason they closed the nearest train station in the rain and made all the fans walk together 40 minutes away. Thank you very much for that, those who run the transport network. But you watch it and you just sort of like, I never felt like City were going to slip.
Yeah.
And we need that. And if we don't have that, Danny, I don't know. I just kept thinking, if that Arsenal can't win it, even with Lady Luck on their side and the period of development, I don't know. It made me feel a bit glum, I got to say.
Yeah, I think right now, I hear where I'm buying what you're selling. I think where I'm at right now with how this all is going to play itself out is continuing the managerial carousel. And I think when Pep leaves Manchester City, and I mean this with all due respect, it's who, and we're going to see this with Arne Slot coming in and replacing Jurgen Klopp, and the infrastructure behind the scenes changing as well. Just like we saw the changing of the guard with Arsene Wenger leaving. And, you know, remember Sven Mislintat that was supposed to come over, whole GoldenEye, you know, before they got that right with Edu coming in and the infrastructure changing. There's going to be a power shift, but it's going to be about the departure of the manager and the incoming manager. And I think that's going to be the question mark. It's going to be as much as it is about availability of money and the investment in the squad and being able to take a £50 million risk and lose that risk. That player turning into nothing and having him sent to West Ham. You know, there's sorry, it was too easy.
Stop bringing that up. Stop bringing that up. All right, we moved on. We've moved on.
Is he still available? Is he?
I hope not.
I think that is going to be the change in the power suite. Because you know, Arteta's not going anywhere. I think as the evolution continues at Arsenal, will he be tempted by a job here or there? Potentially, but I can't see him leaving right now because of the longevity of what he's built. Yeah. But for Pep's been there a while. So when Pep elects to leave, and I would assume watching Jurgen Klopp's departure would create two different sets of ideas for Pep, right? One is, oh, he's going to go for a little break. Man, that'd be nice to have a little break. Or two, okay, he's gone. One less person to have to compete with. Let's dial it in and continue to win. So I hear you. I'm buying what you're selling. Arsenal have done. As you were saying, as you were speaking, I was going through the laundry list of players, and I was just thinking about, you know, Gabriel coming in and Saliba going on loan and Saliba coming back and the drama surrounding, you know, should he stay or should he go? Does Arteta believe in him? Does he not? Ben White coming over from Brighton, adding Declan Rice, bringing in Odegaard, and the loan that turns into a transfer, the continued development of Saka, bringing in Jesus and Zinchenko at the same time, Martinelli being a fantastic player, but then adding Trossard on that other side. Thinking about Partey, can you keep him healthy? Can you not keep him healthy? What does that look like short term? Is he good enough long term? Kai Havertz was not a stroke of genius until you put him in the number 9 position, and then you figured it all out. And that's where, and by the way, I think we should figure out a way to coincide the run from the start of January, the blip, and the being knocked out against Bayern Munich, and where Kai Havertz was moved back in the midfield, and now that he's been moved back up top, kind of seeing this run, I think it's clearly evident that his best position is playing higher and outside of that trifecta in the midfield. And then even something like Jorginho coming over from Chelsea, being a fantastic addition in an odd sense that you're not going to rely on him every single week, but you're going to rely on him for stretches of the season. So when you put in together that type of growth and game plan, and then that model of growth within the team, and I should say David Raya as well, all of a sudden you start thinking, well, what could Spurs do under Ange Postecoglou with the right investment from Daniel Levy and company, knowing that you've got arguably the best stadium in England and or in Europe, you are in the heart of London, and you've got a manager that's inspirational. All of those things, I think, lead to, unfortunately, as a Manchester United fan, very positive things for Tottenham and for Arsenal.
Yeah, I mean, just finally on that, I make this point all the time about Man City not being able to fail in the transfer market. They can buy Mateus Nunes and he who shall not be named on loan at West Ham just to see if they turn out to be any good. And that is another impressive feat about Arsenal's transfer management. Yes, again, they spend a lot of money, British record transfer fee money, huge money. But if Declan Rice turns out to be a failure in the way Jack Grealish was for an entire year, that would have affected their season so massively in a way that Jack Grealish being born made no difference to their title win of 2 years ago. Listen, Mo Salah, this weekend, the other game I went to this weekend, decent weekend for me, actually. West Ham 2-2. The Liverpool story is the most interesting part of it, not because they failed to beat West Ham. I don't think they were good enough to beat West Ham, and it was another masterclass from the old Moisés. Gonna miss him. God bless him. But the Salah Klopp touchline thing. Give us your view on that, because I mean everyone's seen it now, but if you haven't, West Ham equalised. Salah was all ready to come on. There's some sort of interaction, altercation. Salah doesn't sort of shake Klopp's hand. They've said something to each other, and weirdly, Darwin Núñez of all people in the world is peacemaker in this moment. What did you make to it, and how common is this sort of thing? And is it just weird that we saw it?
First off, I'm going to get up on my soapbox. I absolutely cannot stand the fact that players don't have their shin guards on and their boots tied, and that are immediately ready to come on. That they need to come over and they need to find their shin guard holders, and then they got to put the shin guards in, and then they got to put the socks down. Then they need to ask the trainer for a roll of tape, and then they've got to put the tape on, and then they've got to ask the kit guy comes over and hands them the jersey, and they put the jersey. Like, all of these things are just so. And maybe I'm just old school. I don't know. I've been there. Clive Charles, who's the coach of our Olympic team, I can vividly remember he asked the guy to get ready. He didn't have his shin. He's like, okay, come on, Scotty, you're coming in. Didn't have his shin guards on. Socks were pulled down. He goes, you know what? F it. Sorry, Tim. You're not ready. Okay, Joey, get your shit on. Let's go. Sorry, Tim. And he literally lost the ability to play for the Olympic team in a game because he didn't have his shin guards on. So I don't know. I watch this each and every week, and I just don't understand it. I get if you're a goalkeeper and you don't have your gloves on, but just have your fucking shin guards on. Sorry, Tim. Just be ready to go. It's just, if the manager wants to have an effect on the game and he's asking you to be the substitute, it shouldn't take more than 30 seconds to get your bib off, take your training top off, put your jersey on, and walk right up. I don't get it. I really don't get it. And yes, it is always around 20 minutes where we actually break the seal of cursing, and then all of a sudden everything goes downhill.
Could just feel Tim's face just screwing up the more we do this.
Sorry, Tim. I tried.
Sorry, Tim.
See, those are 2 freebies. Okay, so I saw in real time what happened, but then on social, I saw the video from a fan that kind of showed the I guess the confrontation before the confrontation. And first off, what I'll say is, from Mo Salah's perspective, I can understand because of his career. I can understand if he's not in the starting 11. There's a I don't want to say mopiness to it, if that's the right description, but it's like, dude, I should be playing every single game. I'm Mo Salah. Like what I've done for you, the sweat equity that I've earned, I should be in the starting 11. Even when I'm not playing well or I'm not creating or I'm not pressing, I'm still Mo Salah, Liverpool. I get all that. But there also comes a time where I would suggest as a player, kind of like, yeah, all right, bro, I got you. Now you need me. And I wonder in that moment, and I cannot for the life of me find the moment that Mo Salah had come over with Darwin Nunez and company, and it was going to be that three-prong switch. I can't find the time in which he indicated that he wanted it before Mikel Antonio's goal, because I just wonder. It was like, all right, like we're going to need you, go win the game, versus okay, now we need you to tie the game. Now we need you to come on and have it. Oh, like now you need me? Like now you need me, bro? Like those type of I'm not suggesting that happen, but I'm just telling you I've seen it happen as a player. So I understand the complexity of the situation. But when I saw the fan video when he goes over to kind of like, Klopp always gives a hard like high five, like a pull-in hug, like let's go. Like that's his connectivity. Mo wasn't having it. And so when I saw then the real, like then I now understand the real time where you see Klopp kind of walk over. I would assume I'm assuming as a player, from my perspective, former player, I'm assuming it was something along the lines of, "Oh, you ready now? Now you ready?" Like, and then it's like, "No, man, fuck you." Like, sorry, Tim. Like that. And then what I don't like how demonstrative he was. I'm looking at it from a player's perspective. You have to understand that there's still like you can look at him as a person. This could be an everyday life thing, but this isn't. This is your boss. This is the boss. And I get that you're Mo Salah, and I get that you have all the equity in the world, but there's still that respect line, and that's your boss. You can't act like that. And so the complexity of this situation is so deep. I mean, obviously, Klopp's leaving. We don't understand what's happened since the FA Cup loss to Manchester United, which this skid has continued to go on. We thought when they won the Carabao Cup with the kids that this was a quad, that this was we're going to play for, get one for the Gipper. He's the manager. We're going to go out in style. We're going to all win for him. And it's gone completely sideways. And this just shows the complexity of ego, of relationship, and momentum that all comes into play within a club. Because we'll judge for 90 minutes, but we kind of don't understand always what happens in the locker room. We don't understand the complexity with managers. I've had managers that I've had zero respect for. I've had managers like Ray Hudson that I'd run through the fucking wall for. Sorry, Tim. But you still understand at the end of the day, he's the boss. And you have to figure out a way to show that respect. So Klopp tries to diffuse it post game. Obviously, Mo's said, if I speak, there's going to be fire and whatever that, however that. Here's the bottom line for me. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate that these two people that are such iconic presence in football, and I have no skin in the game in Liverpool, and obviously I'm a Manchester United fan. I'm just talking from a pure soccer purist fan perspective. I hate it. That's not how it's supposed to end. With the amount of hugs and the amount of that connectivity that they've had, in particular those two, and how many iconic moments they've had on the field together, that if this is the way this is going to end, I hate that this becomes a part of the story of what was an incredible relationship, seemingly both on and off the field. Because the success that those two had within the collective of Liverpool was such a visual, iconic presence that now everybody's going to be able to say, but yeah, you remember what happened at the Bowl of Disappointment? You remember what happened at West Ham? Like, I don't. I wanted it to go out with like a fairy tale story. I didn't want it to go out in this type of style. So however it lays out, I hate it. I just don't like it. I don't like the optics. I don't like the visuals, and I don't like it for the history of what these two men were to one another.
Yeah, definitely not great from Salah at all, but it does feed into that wider conversation we keep on having about the fact that Klopp told us, I'm out of energy, I've had enough. And you see his pre-match, his post-match, his during, the handshake with Sean Dyche, which we spoke about last week. That's just a man that's had enough and has quit his job and is hanging on until that final day where he can pack up his stuff, get in the car, and not come back for some time. I kind of hope it happens for him sooner rather than later. Maybe don't come to the last few. I think Slot's going to come in now. It'll be fine. Listen, Danny, one final big topic for us today, and we can't go too deep on it because we haven't got the details as yet, but I'd love to get your initial response to this story. profitability and sustainability has not worked.
Yep.
It hasn't worked as a concept. The £35 million loss every year. We're getting points deductions. We're getting a lack of growth from teams in the mid-level. Wolves couldn't buy a striker. All that sort of stuff, right? Yeah. So the Premier League have agreed in principle, the clubs have agreed in principle for a spending cap to come in, known as anchoring, to TV earnings of the bottom club. In real short, the principle is based on anchoring that limits the amount of money any club can invest in their squad. It's tied to a multiple yet to be determined of what the lowest earners receive from the Premier League's centralised broadcast and commercial deals. There's some speculation about 4.5. That times what the earnings of the bottom club would be. The last round was Southampton, 103.6 million. That had put everyone underneath the bar except for Chelsea currently. Man City will be playing it pretty close to that level. Man City voted against it. No way. Man United voted against it. They've got the third largest wage bill in the league. And there's a third club, I think, with Aston Villa, because they see a lot of growth in their future, so they don't want to be tied to this potentially. Chelsea abstained. Everyone else voted for these changes in principle. To get 16 clubs and the majority of the big six, plus Newcastle to agree to this is really, really interesting. We don't know what the level is, but I saw a great meme of a stock photograph of two guys working on their computers. One was overlooking the other. Like it was like, I'm going to copy your work. And one was Premier League and one was MLS. How MLS is this? And in principle, do you like it? Do you not like it?
Yeah, I mean, I think more and more with the investment module of what we've seen in the Premier League, you're obviously going to have a lot more of an influence of Americana sports, right? And salary cap, salary budget, however you define it, kind of putting spending limits. How do I go about this? I hate it. I hate it, and I understand it at the same time. I think one of the beauties and the powerhouse of the spending with the wages and the purchase power of the Premier League, and even for someone like yourself having Paqueta come over to West Ham, we were both laughing when it initially happened because we were like, holy crap, West Ham now has the power to sign a player like Lucas Paqueta, who's starting for Brazil at the World Cup. Like, things are changing. I get the different models, whether we talk about France or we talk about Spain or we talk about even the Bundesliga. I obviously understand Major League Soccer for the most part inside out. But this is what I think there's a couple factors happening in this. Number one, I think this is a continued reaction to the idea of the Super League, which was more of a PR crisis than anything, right? Poorly handled. But the idea, everybody kind of understood that you were going to look for locked in funds. Understand that. I still obviously completely faulty with the way that they tried to present it and activate it. So I think there's a trickle down there. I think number two, you have guys like Steve Parish from Crystal Palace and the people that are now running Arsenal thinking, okay, we can cap this and still capitalize on our commercial success and still think about utilizing the money, but we need to be more streamlined. We need to make sure that we're not paying players $350,000 a week, that we're still in line between 100 and 200,000, and that's going to, bring spending down. We're going to have more profit and less loss. But if you're Man City and you're Manchester United, the commercial power, if you're going to say, hold on a second, we can generate between $800 million and $1 billion each and every year on what we've built as a club. You guys telling us what we can spend and what we can't spend. Sorry, Tim. Now, theoretically, I think if the league was going to start right now and you're saying everything's completely equitable and even, I think this is a brilliant idea. I really do. But it's not. That's not what the reality is. So I then wonder, and again, this is until 25, 26, I still wonder what this is going to look like behind the scenes, because the people that feel as though that you're going to try to tell them that their business model is capped, even though their business model is insanely successful, it's going to piss a lot of people off. And people are going to try to look for creases to try to maneuver in to figure out what better options look like. So in a way, I think there's a real positive to this. And in the flip side, I think there's a huge negative to this. And I'm intrigued to see how this is going to be applied and what this looks like, because now that we're putting these people behind the scenes that are trying to really put these bolts and locks onto what's happening, In a way, I think it will be beneficial for the parity of the sporting parity of the league. But at the same time, there's a reason why the Premier League is considered the best league in the world, and that's because they've been able to go out and do this. It affects primarily Premier League teams. This whole idea of profit and sustainability, very rarely are we going to be talking about the loss or the potential loss of a Premier League team disappearing into thin air. These are more from the championship clubs down. So yeah, we'll see, man. I think more and more as we hear the experts kind of speak about it and kind of allow us to understand what exactly is happening, we'll have even more clarity. But I can understand why some of the big clubs are really, really frustrated with even the idea of this being brought to a vote, much less being voted upon.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll do more on this when the vote has gone through and we know what the ratio is. Because if it's 5, I think that's too high. If it's 2, I think it's too low. And so they need to find the right balance for what the ratio is for how much you can spend. But something has to be done to stop Man City. Something has to be done to stop the amount of wealth that's come into the league through non-commercial streams from taking the league away from the rest of us. I think there was a distinct lack of competitiveness around the title race and has been for some time. And look, Man City have destroyed it. This is a golden goose for so many people. And I do think we're in a situation where they need to be stopped. So I'm delighted that so many teams, including Arsenal and Liverpool, have voted for this in principle. And we'll have a further conversation on it down the line, definitely. But I think there's a possibility this might give us more competitiveness in the league, while still, if you set it high enough, give an advantage on those other leagues like Serie A and the Bundesliga, who could only dream of having the concept of more egalitarianism when it comes to distribution of wealth. If more money went to Darmstadt, the Bundesliga would be better. If more money went to Alaves, La Liga would be better. But the other ones who stop that, Real Madrid and Bayern Munich. And so, in short, them. Sorry, Tim. Right, heroes and villains. Danny, who's your hero of the week?
Oh, my hero of the week has to be Erik ten Hag. It just has to be. I mean,
you couldn't resist it. He's your hero every week.
I mean, when he was talking about how much full control they were in, the chances generated, the fact that he was ignoring the boos when he took off Rasmus Højlund and Kobe Mainoo, the fact that the final whistle that the fans inside the stadium, it's very different than us watching television and the Twitter warriors, that the fans inside the stadium were booing. Just a quick reminder for Erik ten Hag. It's Burnley. You drew 1-1 and it was Burnley at home. Yeah. They had a lot of great opportunities to win that game. Don't blame the referee. It was still Burnley.
Blame Onana. But not learning his lesson 9 months later. You can't try and
but he had 4 great saves too. I mean, he had 4 unbelievable saves in that game.
He's just De Gea, isn't he? Isn't he just De Gea? But what's changed? It's the same guy.
I mean, he's a little bit further outside his penalty area when the ball's at his feet. Yeah.
Seems worth it.
Yeah.
My hero of the week, Danny, is Leicester City. Now, I know that there is an element of hypocrisy here with me on Leicester City because they are alleged to have breached their upper loss limit in their PSR forecasts, their Premier League last season. They have been charged with financial irregularities there, and they might have a points deduction coming into the league because of that. And there's all sorts going on.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be a great summer for Leicester City. And when they come up, they are champions. There is going to be some sort of points deduction under the current rules. But away from that, and again, I accept my hypocrisy on this with all the stuff I say about, Man City and the financial structure of football. I'm happy they're back. I'm happy they won the league because what Leicester gave us in their Premier League title winning season was a bit of hope. They proved to us that football doesn't need to be Saudi Arabia coming in and taking the league from Abu Dhabi. I know they're their own billionaire doing it. This is not a mum and pup store or what the Americans would call it. The local car dealer bought the club and they went on to win the league. Right, those days are long gone. But there was something magic about that happening. There was something brilliant about that season. Them winning the FA Cup, their 10-year journey of 2 championship titles, 1 Premier League title, 1 FA Cup and a relegation, and a great escape as well. Yeah. What an amazing 10 years. Great to have them up. And the last 3 that came up are the worst 3 ever to come up together in Premier League history. So I'm glad we've got a proper competitive team coming up. And also, if anyone saw the Preston North End game on Monday, Jamie Vardy scored twice. He's still going. God bless him. The second goal was such Dunsethery from Jamie Vardy. First goal he scores and goes right up to the home end at Deepdale and gives them the full, Jamie Vardy treatment. The second one's a shot by Wout Face. It's saved by the keeper. Jamie Vardy's 4 yards out. He's just got to tap it in. And he fucking hits it, sorry, Tim, so hard for no reason into the roof of the net, just because he's Jamie Vardy and wanted to be a dick. Yeah. And I just loved it. So that's my hero. Villain, what you got for us?
I was going to say that's your hero and your villain. My hero was really Sean Dyche for the masterclass that he's put on. But my villain, I don't. How do I explain this? I don't really know if they're my villain, but I'm going to go with Nottingham Forest. With the decisions that you've made to publicly utilize Mark Clattenburg with the ability to send and press enter or okay or whatever send it is on Twitter X for what we saw in the last couple of weeks. I think one of the best things I saw all week and I sent to you guys was a tweet that said something along the lines of, I can't remember the referee, but it was a fake Nottingham Forest presser that says, we have requested that said referee for the weekend is been taken off. And the accusation was because he had an Oasis CD at one point during his teens and early manhood.
He sang Wonderwall at a bar once. He can't do the game.
So he's most definitely a Manchester City fan. So I would say that. Listen, if there's, from an outside perspective, nobody wants to see teams go down, but don't make yourself the bad guy. And I think right now, with the way that Marinakis and company have decided to treat this season, it most definitely makes it difficult for anybody, I think, as a neutral to root for them after what we've seen. So, yeah, I guess the villain side, even though it was based on a funny, I'll go with Nottingham Forest.
And did you see at the Luton game at Wolves at the weekend, there was a fan with a banner that said, Stuart Atwell, he's one of our own. Just
brilliant.
Superb. That's the real hero of the week. Listen, my villain, really briefly, Derby County are going back to the Championship. Relegated a couple of years ago with Wayne Rooney in charge, huge points deduction, all that sort of stuff. They're coming up, but they're coming up in second. And that's great achievement. You're coming up. That's really important. They celebrated at Pride Park on the field. It's a big achievement. That's all great. Then the players lined up in front of the tunnel and somebody brought out a trophy.
I saw that.
What are you lifting there, lads?
It was a tiny little thing.
You get a trophy for winning the league and you get a trophy for winning the playoffs because that is almost a separate competition. As well as you get promotion, you win the trophy, you've won the playoffs. So I get that. I'll accept that.
Yeah.
You don't get a trophy for second. There is no trophy for second. Your reward is promotion. And I've not looked into this. I don't think the league provided that trophy. I don't think there is a trophy that does the rounds. Someone has gone down to like Bill's Trophy Emporium, Derby Town Centre, bought a little trophy, the kind of thing you get for winning the local under 16s league.
It's a promotion trophy.
Just they spent £5 on it and gave it to the team on the field.
Oh, it was so small.
No, Dunny, no.
I loved it. You sent it to our group chat. You were so angry.
just no. I can't have it.
It was such a perplexing situation for you to send that, and you're like, "Look at the size of this trophy." And by the way, they got second. Why are they lifting a trophy? I mean, good for them. Their fan base is dealt with so much bullshit. Sorry, Tim, over the last couple of seasons. So, yeah, here's your promotion trophy.
Fair enough, I guess. Here's something we stole off some children outside. Congratulations. Right, that's it for this week's Week in the Tackle. We'll be back next week. If you watch the show on YouTube or Spotify, we are a podcast you can listen to in the audio medium. If you listen to the program as a podcast, you can watch it on YouTube or Spotify. Tim Horsey produced the program. I'm Tom Money. That's Brian Dunseth. We'll see you next week.